Javier, Federico, come inside. The apple pie has been ready for a while, shouted Andrea, sticking her head out of the window on the first floor of the house. How long are you going to make us wait? It's almost cold. Andrea was a bustling woman over 30. She didn't have a job, but it couldn't be said that she did nothing while staying at home. She did a lot. Household chores and domestic life were her work. Her husband Federico worked at a factory and provided for their harmonious family. Life was calm and measured, without excessive pomp or poverty. They balanced somewhere in the middle. A typical family. The house window faced the yard where Andrea's son and her husband were playing soccer with the neighbor's children. It was a rather hot day. The sun brightly lit the yard and played cheerfully with reflections on the small lake also located in the yard. Today was Wednesday, which meant it was Apple Day. That was how the boy and the man usually called it. Every week on this day, Andrea always baked her signature apple pie. Federico had the day off today. We're coming, Mom. Javier shouted cheerfully. He was a 10-year-old boy, full of health. He always delighted his beloved mom with his cheerfulness. His head was adorned with short curls, and freckles danced on his face. Almost his whole soul belonged to soccer. The walls were covered with related posters. Many toys connected to this sport were in his room. Come quickly. There will be more time to play later, Andrea replied. Federico and Javier finally entered the house. So, are you all covered in grass and dirt again? Andrea said with a smile and without anger. Her face was calm, as this was not the first time it had happened. Often her men would come back dirty after playing soccer. We're just a little bit, Javier smiled, drawing out the last word. Don't be mad, sweetheart. This was the first and last time, Federico said. I promise, he added with a smile. Andrea knew this was definitely not the last time. She understood it perfectly, so she smiled sweetly again. Federico and Javier didn't often play soccer together. Mostly, the boy frolicked with the neighbor's children. But as soon as they went outside together, goodbye clean clothes. Hello, washing machine. All right, wash your hands and come to the table, the woman kissed her husband on the cheek. I won't let you in dirty. All right, we're going to wash, said the boy and the man in unison. Mom, do you need help getting to the table? Andrea asked an elderly woman who had just joined them. No, dear, I can manage myself, the elderly woman Belinda slowly said in her deep voice, which the boy always somehow liked. She was his grandmother and Andrea's mother. Andrea didn't listen to her mom and still helped her to sit at the table. Belinda was ill. Many things were now difficult for her, but she still didn't want to show it. That was her character, nothing could be done about it. Dear, I said I can sit by myself, she added. Grandma, how are you feeling today? The boy asked, coming back to the table. Good, my dear, good. That's great. And our team won today. Tell her, Dad, we beat them so well. This way and that way. Javier exclaimed cheerfully, waving his arms in the air. Let's get to the table. You can tell Grandma how we beat them later, the man laughed. Belinda gently tousled her grandson's hair and brought a cup of coffee to her lips. Federico turned on the TV that was near the wall. Nothing interesting. As usual. Javier knew that Federico was not his biological father. But he didn't know who his real father was either. One Sunday evening at dinner, a conversation on this topic started among the three of them. Belinda was already asleep in her room at that time. She wasn't feeling well that day. Mom, why has Dad's voice changed suddenly? It seems different than before, the boy asked. Andrea choked a little. Then she quickly came up with an explanation for the boy. You see, son, Papa Federico is not your biological father. It just happened that way. He's your stepfather. Oh, I see, the boy said. Eat up, eat up. Otherwise, it will get cold. Maybe Javier wanted to ask something else then. For instance, who his real father was and where he was. But in the end, the boy decided not to ask. In the future, their family never discussed this topic again. It was just the way it was. Federico was the stepfather. The real father wasn't there. "Dad, are you off tomorrow?" Javier asked the man. "No, Javier. I'm going to work tomorrow." "That's too bad. I thought we could play together again." "We do that so rarely," the boy said sadly. "We'll play later." Federico also perfectly understood that Javier was not his biological son. And perhaps that's why his attitude towards him was a bit cold. No one really noticed this, except the boy himself, who fully felt it. Nevertheless, the man had a warm attitude towards the boy. Yes, he was not his biological son. But the most important thing was that he was his son. The next day passed quietly. The sun rose again from the horizon, signaling the beginning of a new day. The summer holidays were in full swing. In the morning, Federico received a phone call informing him that he had the day off. So he continued to sleep. Javier played football with some kids again. Mom, as always, was busy around the house. And Grandma was sitting on the veranda, holding a book. But she wasn't reading it, she was looking into the distance, thinking about something. Due to her illness, she rarely left the house. So today was one of those lucky days. Having played enough with the kids, the boy ran up to his grandmother. "Already done playing?" the old lady asked in her usual kind and deep voice. "Yes, I don't feel like playing anymore." Belinda stroked her grandson's head. She knew well from whom the boy inherited those beautiful curls. Perhaps she herself wanted to tell the boy about his real father. But she just didn't see the need for it. There was no point in stirring up the past. What mattered was the present. "Let's go inside. I'll bake you something tasty." "What do you want?" "I don't even know. What does my grandson love more than anything in the world?" "Churros." Javier brightened up. "Of course churros, my boy. Help this old lady get up." "Oh, Grandma." "What old lady? You are the best grandmother in the world. You sure know how to make your grandma happy with compliments. Don't call yourself that anymore. That's what makes you different from your stepfather," Belinda thought to herself. But she said nothing aloud. "Your father was too kind and responsive." Belinda made the long-awaited churros for her grandson. And soon Federico came down from the second floor. He greeted the family and went outside. He wanted to get some fresh air. "Who wants fried steaks?" he suddenly asked when he came back inside. "Let me cook them." "Why so?" "Usually, you spend your days off completely differently," Andrea said in surprise. "Well, I felt like grilling today." "Well, why not?" Andrea replied, approaching the table where the grandmother and grandson were sitting. Then she kissed Federico on the cheek and quickly flitted away, just as she had appeared. "Javier, will you join me?" "Of course," the boy replied. His eyes lit up. He partly missed having the father around. And here was a new opportunity to be with him. But what about Grandma? "Go on, dear, go. You need to spend more time outside. We've already sat enough today." "All right, I'll wait for you in the yard," said the man. Javier hugged Belinda tightly and ran outside. The old woman looked at her grandson with affection. "That's right, yes, exactly. That's how you should flip these pieces of meat," the man said. He was teaching the boy how to grill steaks, and it seemed like they were doing quite well. Soon, everything was ready. The juicy steaks were brought into the house, and their aroma was enticing. "Oh, how wonderful it smells," Andrea exclaimed. "My mouth is watering already." "Well, here it is. We did our best." "Where's Grandma?" the boy asked. "She's in her room, sweetie." Javier happily ran to the stairs. No, Javier. Don't go. Grandma is sleeping right now. The boy felt a little sad again. Don't worry, sweetie. You'll spend time together tomorrow. So they spent the rest of the day sitting in the living room. Federico didn't break his traditions. He settled into his chair and turned on the TV. Now his day off was going as usual. He watched a sports match on TV, holding a bottle of beer in his hand. The next day, Federico left for work early. Unfortunately, the day was no longer as hot and sunny. The weather was gray and rainy from the morning. This meant Javier couldn't play soccer with the other kids. Summer vacation was in full swing, so there was nowhere to go. But Grandma Belinda wasn't feeling well again today. Oh, this nasty illness. Why is it bothering Grandma? When will it leave her alone? Javier kept thinking. He decided to go to her room. She couldn't come out today because she was feeling unwell. Oh, my boy. Did you come to check on me? Hi, Grandma. Shall we watch something on TV? A wildlife show? Javier's eyes lit up immediately. Besides his main hobby, soccer, he also loved wildlife shows. He didn't like bad weather, but if he was with his grandma, watching a wildlife show together in a room and eating something delicious made it not matter what was happening outside. Be it a hurricane or a tornado, the main thing was that Grandma was nearby, warming him with her loving presence. Andrea brought them some treats to the room. She had almost finished cleaning the house and was about to start cooking dinner. Belinda and Javier watched the show almost until evening. Time always flew by unnoticed for these two. Dinner is ready. Andrea shouted from the first floor. Tell your mom to bring the food here. I don't think I can sit at the table with you today. Javier's face turned sad again. Okay, Grandma. I'll tell her, the boy said and left the room. Coming downstairs, he saw Federico. The weather outside hadn't changed, the same wind and annoying rain. Hello, Javier. Why the long face? Grandma won't be able to have dinner with us again, the boy said sadly. Mom, she asked you to bring her food to her room. I'll go up to her now, Andrea sighed. She loved her mother very much and worried about her health every day. And you too, wash your hands and come to the table. Okay, said the boy. Federico kissed his wife and she went upstairs. What did you do today? Watching wildlife shows again, I bet, the man asked with a smile. Yeah. The weather's gone wild today. This doesn't happen often in our town. It's even pounding on the windows. No. Andrea's voice echoed through the house. The boy shuddered and looked at the man. Federico immediately sprang up. Stay here. I'll go upstairs, he told the boy. Javier slowly shook his head. But he didn't even understand what Federico had just told him. For some reason, his heart started beating faster in his small chest. The boy got up from his chair and rushed after him. The wind and rain were still pounding on the window. And with each new strike, the boy became more and more anxious. An inexplicable fear enveloped his immature soul. No more screams could be heard. That scared him even more. The dead silence rang in his ears. Javier slowly approached his grandmother's room. Andrea was trembling in Federico's arms. She saw nothing around her. They both stood there, not noticing Javier, who had been standing there for about a minute. It took a few seconds for him to realize what had really happened here. Grandma was completely still, lying in bed. One could have thought she was asleep. But she wasn't. Belinda lay motionless, her hand hanging off the bed. A cup lay on the floor. The old woman was dead. And the TV was still showing a nature program. Javier felt like he was in a strange fog. He clearly realized what had happened. But he didn't know how to react. He had learned one of life's sorrows too early. Death and the loss of a loved one. Mama. The boy whispered. Oh God, Javier. My dear. Andrea said tearfully. Javier, let's go. I told you to stay downstairs, the man said. Grandma, she's dead, isn't she? The boy stammered. Javier. It's all because of that damn disease. Javier shouted and quickly ran downstairs. Then he ran out into the yard. The rain was pouring down endlessly. Javier could no longer hold back. He fell to his knees on the grass and began to sob. Through his tears, he looked at the veranda where Grandma had sat just yesterday. Just yesterday, they had sat there together. And just yesterday, the old woman had baked his favorite churros. Recently, they had watched TV together, and now she was dead. Today was the funeral. On the faces of Javier and Andrea, there was only sorrow. They had lost their dearest and most beloved person. The mother hugged her son tightly. Federico held an umbrella over their heads. Soon they returned home. Everything was different now. As if something had disappeared from this house forever. Something that would never return. Andrea was so broken that she didn't want to do anything around the house. The man gave her a sleeping pill. And then he decided to cook a hearty dinner himself. Javier, how are you, kid? He asked the despondent child. The boy was silent. Do you want to sit in the kitchen while I cook? Maybe I'll go to my room, the boy quietly said, looking at the floor. Of course, of course. Go ahead, the man sighed. So the day passed, then 2 days, 3. A week went by. A strange week that was like one long Groundhog Day. Coming home from work, Federico saw only one scene. How his once lively wife had now completely withered. She spent almost all her time on the first floor of their house. On the couch. She hardly ever went upstairs. It was impossible to say that she could even enter her mother's room. Their bond had been too close. Andrea needed a lot of time to recover. Now all the housework and cooking fell on Federico. Javier often sat with the woman. One weekend, the man was at home. Andrea, though only slightly, had begun to recover. She finally decided to go upstairs to enter Belinda's room. Perhaps it was too early. Or something else influenced what happened next. Quite unexpectedly, the woman had a stroke. Right at the moment when she was leaving the room. Javier immediately told Federico that something was wrong with Mama. She was lying on the floor unconscious. Federico quickly rushed upstairs. The ambulance took the woman and brought her to the hospital. She will be okay, right? The boy asked anxiously. Of course. She will be fine. And she will be back home very soon, the man looked at the child. The next day, the man took a day off work to go to the hospital. Javier went with him. There, the doctor explained to the man the cause of the sudden stroke. You see, here's the thing. We discovered a blockage in your wife's blood vessels. What does she do? Where does she work? She doesn't work. She's always been busy with house chores. She ran around a lot, always bustling about. Well, before her mother passed away. Now it's clear. You see. From all that constant running around the house, it seems she developed varicose veins. And, you know, it increases the risk of cardiovascular diseases. Moreover, the doctor continued, taking off his glasses. As you said, she is practically doing nothing now. And from what I understand, she rarely leaves the house. So, she lacks normal physical activity. The cholesterol from the home-cooked food she's been eating might have caused the blockage. And on top of all that, her mother recently died. Such stress also affects health. It seems her mother's death was a real blow to Andrea. Yes, you're right. She was very distressed by the loss, the man said. What will happen next, doctor? Can you help her? She'll be under our close supervision for now. Then we'll see. So, she's staying in the hospital? For now, yes. But please, don't worry too much. Your son needs you as well, the doctor said, looking at the child. Everything will be fine. Thank you, doctor. Thank you very much. A week passed, then another, a third, and a fourth. A month went by, but there were no positive results at all. Javier's school was about to start soon. But he had no motivation. All his thoughts were gloomy. One day, Federico and the boy decided to visit Andrea. Entering the ward, they felt very sad. "Mom, how are you? When will you be discharged?" Javier bombarded her with questions. "My dear son." "Soon, very soon," the woman replied, stroking his head. She didn't look very healthy. The shadow of the old Andrea lay on the hospital bed. "Of course, Javier. Our mom will be discharged very soon," the man said with a sigh. "I don't want to leave. I will stay here." "Javier, you can't do that," the woman said quietly. "Besides, I will really be back home soon." "Don't be sad," she smiled. Several more long months passed. The doctors tried hard to stabilize the poor woman's health, but nothing worked. One of those days, the inevitable happened. Andrea suffered another stroke while she was in the ward. Unfortunately, she couldn't survive it. The little boy found out this news after coming home from school. Entering the house, he saw that Federico looked even more downcast and gloomy than usual. He was just standing in the kitchen, staring out the window. It seemed that his thoughts were somewhere else. But he looked at Javier. Then he came up to him and knelt down. "Javier, I need to tell you something. Did something terrible happen?" Federico sighed heavily and looked away. "Mom, she passed away this morning." Federico hugged the boy tightly. Javier was once again enveloped in an unclear fog. Everything felt like a dream. The man comforted him as best as he could, not letting go of the embrace, while the boy stood there limply, staring into the void. A lot of sorrow befell their family during this time. The funerals of two beloved people weighed heavily on the boy and the man. Besides the emotional burden, Federico also faced financial problems. Now he had to work twice as hard. All this began to distance the man from Javier. With each passing day, more and more. A deep chasm of separation began to appear between them. And then, Federico started drinking. Drinking heavily and incessantly. Alcohol helped him forget, even if just for a little while. This was his way of trying to escape the immense grief. Javier, however, was now completely forgotten. The warmth of his grandmother's caress was no more. Wildlife shows no longer interested the boy. Every time he tried to watch even one, he remembered that ill-fated evening. He no longer played soccer, not with the neighborhood kids, and certainly not with his stepfather. His mother would never again scold them for dirty clothes or call them to a delicious dinner. The aroma of apple pie would never again fill their house on Wednesdays. No one liked Wednesdays there anymore. All of this would never happen again. And the boy understood this perfectly. His young life was just beginning and was filled with the colors of childhood. But too early he was engulfed in darkness and endless fear. From now on, Javier was in a state of terror and inexplicable doom. For at the age of 10, he had been abandoned by everyone. Naturally, he didn't know how to cope with all this. How to learn to live on and accept everything that had happened. Due to great anxiety, the boy began to cry a lot, biting his lips until they bled. He often bit his hangnails and broke his nails. Once energetic and cheerful, with freckles dancing on his face, he turned into a nervous child. His gaze had forever become downcast and gray. Federico, meanwhile, drank every day, without stopping. One day, Javier went downstairs to get something to eat. "Oh, Javier," mumbled his stepfather, lying on the couch. "Are you hungry? There's some food on the stove. I cooked a little." The man hiccuped after almost every word. The boy was horrified at the man's current appearance. Now he was very thin. Large dark circles under his eyes were from practically no sleep. He didn't look like himself. And now, what lay on the couch was just a shadow of a healthy man. He was faceless and extinguished. He was beginning to lose his backbone and himself. Sometimes he rambled a lot if he managed to fall asleep. Because the man drank every day, another event occurred. Federico went to work, and Javier went to school. In the afternoon, law enforcement officers came to the school. At first, it wasn't clear why they were there. But it wasn't clear until one moment. A man came directly to Javier's class. He asked the teacher to step out into the hallway. A few minutes later, she came back in and called the boy to come with her. They told him about Federico's death. He had died at work. It wasn't long before the boy found himself in an orphanage. In less than 6 months, he had lost his entire family. He lost everyone and now stood in the living room of the orphanage. He just didn't understand why all this was happening to him. Why, in such a short time, he had lost everyone. Children. Look over here. Children. Finally, everyone paid attention to the caregiver. Meet Javier. He will now be living with you. For the boy, it was all the same long dream. A dream that began on the day of his grandmother's death. He still didn't want to accept everything that was happening to him. "Hi, Javier," greeted a pleasant-looking boy. Javier was silent. "Is he mute?" another child asked. The children around him burst into loud laughter. "August, you should support the new boy, not mock him. And that goes for everyone." "Well, why is he silent?" "Javier is just a little upset," the woman said and looked at the boy. "Right, Javier?" The boy ran out of the common room. Everyone laughed again. So passed 1 day, then 2, 3, a week. All of them were torturous and incomprehensible. The boy had absolutely no appetite. He refused to eat. And August, along with his friends, just laughed and joked at him. At one of the dinners, Javier still didn't want to eat. He sat at the table, and opposite him was the boy who had greeted him on the first day. "Why aren't you eating anything?" he asked. "Oh, he's just watching his figure and doesn't want to be so fat," said August, walking past their table. His company laughed again. "Screw you, August," the boy replied. "What did you just say?" "Leave him alone," Javier suddenly said. "Oh, our anorexic has found his voice. You two make a good pair. One's fat, the other's thin." August's friends laughed again. In an instant, Javier stood up and grabbed a glass of juice. He poured it over the bully's head. "Are you out of your mind?" August shouted. His face was shocked. Now everyone was laughing, except for them. "What's the matter? Not so funny now?" Javier asked. "Take your freaks and get out of here." "I'll remember this," the boy replied. "I'll remember. What are you standing there for? Let's go," he then shouted to his friends. "Wow," said the boy at the table. "No one has ever done that before. He annoys me just by existing. That's for sure. But tell me, why aren't you eating?" "No appetite." "I understand. I didn't have any at first either," the boy said. "Then it passed," he added, biting into a bun. "Why are you here?" "I used to be in another orphanage. Then I was moved here because that one closed. Actually, I've been like this since I was 4. My parents don't need me. They're drunks, and they lost their parental rights." "That's sad," Javier drooped again. "Well, I'm going." "All right, see you." 2 whole weeks passed in this place. Javier constantly asked to go home. In his dreams, Belinda came to him with her gentle smile. Then his mom and stepfather. He cried in his sleep. After waking up, his eyes were red. One of those days, the boy decided he would run away from here. Javier said goodbye to his new friend and said that maybe they would meet again someday. His roommate was sad that Javier decided to leave. But he hoped they would meet again. The day Javier ran away was rainy and gloomy again. Raindrops constantly rolled down his face. Once, running along the road, he fell into the mud. Passers-by looked at him with astonished eyes. He asked these same strangers how to get to the cemetery. "Kid, do you need help? Why do you need to go to the cemetery?" "Let me call the police and we'll figure it out," said an unknown man. "Hey, where are you going?" Javier immediately ran away. He didn't need the police or any help from these people. He just needed to get to the cemetery where his family was. For a long time, Javier wandered the city streets. Finally, he saw a stand in the distance. There was a city map on it. The boy ran up to it and took a photo of the map on his phone. After some more time, the boy finally reached the cemetery. Then he saw the caretaker. "Hello," Javier said. The caretaker jumped in surprise. "Sorry. Do you know where the 3 fresh graves are?" "The very new ones." The elderly man looked closely at the child. Was he delirious? "Boy, where are you from?" the man asked, scratching his head. "From the orphanage. The caregivers didn't let me attend the funeral. I really need to, you understand?" Then Javier told his whole story from the beginning. The caretaker thought for a long time about what to do. Finally, he made a decision. The old man was moved by the poor boy's story. He understood that an orphan stood before him. A boy who became one at such a young age. The old man gave him the numbers of the graves. Finally, Javier went to find the graves of his most dear and beloved people. For 10 minutes he searched, walking between rows of monuments and fences. The oppressive silence weighed heavily on him. He wandered among those who would never rise again. And finally, he managed to reach the graves he was looking for. Seeing the tombstones engraved with the names and photographs of his loved ones, he just fell to the ground, completely exhausted. For several minutes, he stared into the void. And then, suddenly, he burst into tears. The boy did not hold back his voice, expressing all his pain. He sat there on the cemetery ground until he completely lost his voice. Memories flashed through his mind. How the 4 of them celebrated some holiday together. How they happily spent time at dinner. How his grandmother and mother gently patted his head. How his stepfather played soccer with him. An hour later, Javier began to calm down a bit. He was still sitting near the tombstones, examining the portraits of his relatives. If only you could all come back to life. We would return to our home. We would have fun like we used to. Why can't a miracle happen? The boy spoke to the graves. "Hello, son." A voice interrupted him from behind. But it wasn't just any voice. This voice was painfully familiar. Javier was overcome by a strong tremor. He slowly turned his head back to where the voice came from. A feeling of something pleasant and very familiar filled his chest. The voice is so familiar. Could it really be? "I am your father," the man said. The boy gasped. It was indeed his father's voice. The first voice he remembered. The man immediately placed his jacket over the boy's shoulders and lifted him off the ground. He brushed the dirt off him and took his fragile, trembling shoulders. Then he knelt before the boy to look into his red, tear-swollen eyes. The boy gasped again when he saw the stranger had the same eyes and nose as he did. And the hair. The man's hair was curly, just like his own. The same beautiful, short curls. "Dad," Javier said weakly in a quiet voice. "Dad." He then shouted, tightly hugging the man. "Javier. My boy. Where have you? Where have you been all this time? What's your name? And those curls? They are just like mine." The man laughed. "Yes, just like yours. My name is Victor. But where have you? Where have you been? My boy, I have a lot to tell you." Victor told his son many things that day. Of course, he left some things out because Javier was still too young. But everyone in the family knew this story. Everyone except the boy himself. Once upon a time, another event happened. Andrea cheated on her husband Federico with Victor. At that time, the couple often quarreled. Federico drank very frequently, not just on weekends. And he didn't limit himself to just one bottle of beer. The woman felt very lonely and broken. That's when she met her neighbor Victor. He was kind, caring, and attentive. Exactly what the woman lacked. And so, they began an affair. Their meetings were passionate and bright. Their conversations long and tender. They felt like they belonged to each other. She was his lyre, he was her savior. But it didn't last long. Sooner or later, it was bound to be revealed. Federico found out everything. Well, I thought so, basically. Do you know what you are, Andrea? Federico, don't. You're the worst kind of scum. He shouted in a drunken voice. Victor punched him in the face. And what are you? A drunken animal. She just wanted love. Andrea deserves it. To hell with both of you. I'm leaving. The man made a big scene and then really left the house. No one knew where he went. And now, Andrea lived with Victor. It seemed everything was fine with them. But the more time passed, the more she realized that it was all weakness. Their affair, their kisses. It was all a weakness that enveloped her in a moment of loneliness. But it was too late. Andrea was pregnant. The young couple prepared for the baby's arrival. What do you want to name him? Victor asked. Maybe Pablo? Pablo. No, it sounds too pretentious. Andrea laughed. What's pretentious about it? Well, I don't know. Gabriel? Andrea asked. Why are you looking at me like that? Gabriel makes me think of some grumpy old man. Andrea laughed again. Maybe. Javier? Victor asked, holding Andrea's belly. Javier. Why that name? Well, I think it's a good name, the man said. He moved. Sweetie, he kicked. I felt it. The woman replied cheerfully. That means the little guy agrees. It's settled. He'll be Javier. He moved again. Hooray! It's decided. So, for years of peaceful life passed. Javier was the spitting image of his father. At 4 years old, the boy's first love began to appear in the form of soccer. My father was passionate about this sport. Apparently, the son will be too. Maybe he'll become a famous soccer player in the future, Andrea replied. Victor didn't have time to respond before a man entered the house. It was Federico. Andrea dropped a cup. Javier saw none of this. He was playing in the yard. All three remained silent. What are you doing here? I came back, the man calmly replied. Darling, forgive me for everything. I don't drink anymore. I got a job. He stepped closer to the couple. But looking out the window, he saw the boy. And that? Federico immediately realized who the boy was. He stepped away from them. After a moment of silence, he continued. I don't care. I want you back, and I will achieve that. He said the last phrase and glanced at Victor. Victor. Wait. Let me say something. I want to say this right away. I'll accept any decision you make. I just ask you to make it consciously. After these words, Victor also left Andrea alone. She didn't know what to do. The next day, she still couldn't make a decision. Victor didn't pressure her with questions. He understood that time was needed. But it was so hard for him to wait for this answer. Federico came every day. And Victor could already see and feel that Andrea was becoming colder and colder towards him every day. He noticed how her eyes lit up when her ex-husband came to them with flowers. One day, Victor decided to talk to Andrea. It pained him to see what was happening. But there was nothing he could do. It was meant to be. Andrea, we need to talk. Yes, I wanted to too. Who will start? You go ahead. Victor, her face was partly sad. There was regret in it. Suddenly, Federico burst into the house. He was very cheerful. Darling, did you already tell him? About what? About our wedding, of course. The man felt like he was doused with cold water. He understood that these two might be seeing each other again. But he wasn't prepared for this. Andrea lowered her eyes and put her hand on her forehead. I wanted to tell myself. Honestly, Victor. All the best. Victor left the room and Federico followed him. Where are you going, buddy? Let me help you pack your suitcase, he replied cheerfully. At that moment, Belinda entered the room. In her gaze, Andrea saw what seemed to be reproach. Mom, don't look at me like that. I'm not. It's your life, your choice. Do whatever you want. But the most important thing is that you understand you're doing the right thing. Right, first and foremost, for yourself. You're the best. Mom, I love you so much. You know that, right? Of course, darling. From then on, old Belinda kept tactfully silent. She just supported her daughter. What an adult child does is no longer her business. Fortunately or unfortunately, it happened. Federico managed to come back to Andrea. Victor said his final goodbye to this place. He left the city. His connection with his son was completely severed. It was decided that the child would stay with his mother and stepfather. The man no longer interfered with them. He well understood that he was partially to blame for everything. For the major quarrel that arose between the spouses. Victor simply couldn't resist the charm of a lonely woman bogged down in everyday life. A woman constantly fighting for her husband's sober life. This doomed the family to a broken marriage. Andrea and Federico's forgotten feelings were rekindled. A week later, they remarried. The boy was not told all the details of the family drama. And so they continued to live. The biological father was replaced by the former husband. 6 years passed this way. Victor and Javier hadn't seen each other for 6 whole years. And now, after such a long time, their meeting happened at the cemetery. At first, Victor didn't understand who was standing next to the graves. Looking closer, he realized. Finally, the boy and his father left the cemetery. The man took the shivering child back to the orphanage. Javier resisted and didn't want to go back. But it was necessary. The boy was immediately fed and put to bed. After a whole day of wandering around the city, after all the tears and tantrums, he was very exhausted. We finally met, whispered the neighbor. Yeah, it's great, the boy replied, yawning. For a few more weeks, the father visited Javier. Of course, he wanted to take his son home. But he wasn't going to do it without his consent. Victor felt responsible for him since he was his flesh and blood. In the neighboring city, where he had moved 6 years ago, he already had another wife and son. Javier, having fully experienced what life without a family meant, couldn't refuse his real father. He wanted to be loved, he desired his real father. He just wanted to be part of a family. He wanted to be needed by someone. Moreover, his father was a calm and interesting person, with whom life promised to be at least not boring. So, while the authorities were processing the documents and conducting a DNA test, the father introduced the boy to his stepmother and younger brother. This happened on a sunny day. Their meeting took place near the orphanage. A very beautiful woman was the first to approach the boy. She was a brunette. It was immediately apparent that she was a fan of vintage clothing. Gloves adorned her hands, and her dress was so exquisite. The boy liked her right away. Hello, Javier. I'm your dad's wife, the woman said, very nervously. How are you? Are you happy that you'll soon be living with us? Then an 8-year-old boy ran up to them. Amazingly, he also had curls. But it was clear that he was the spitting image of his mother. Eyes, nose, chin, all hers. He was dressed in a nice shirt and trousers. "Hi. I'm Ernest. Will you be my brother?" he asked cheerfully, approaching Javier. Javier smiled. His mood instantly became even better. The boy was so funny, and his mom such a sweet woman. There was an aura of great kindness around them. "Hi, I'm Javier." "Of course, I will." Then Javier and Ernest were left alone for a while. They didn't go far. They stayed close to their parents. The boys immediately found many common topics and quickly became friends. Victor's wife was filled with genuine maternal sympathy for the boy, who had experienced the greatest loss of his life in such a short time. She didn't think for a minute about her husband's proposal to take him in. And the brothers, due to their age, became even closer friends. A few days later, the DNA test was confirmed. Javier was finally given to his biological father. The caregivers were genuinely happy for the boy. "I'll miss you," said Javier's new friend. "I'll miss you too," replied the boy. "But I promise, in the future we will definitely meet again." "That would be great." "It will be." They hugged each other tightly in farewell. "In 15 minutes, we will go home," Victor said to the two boys playing with a ball. Now Javier will be able to play soccer with him. "Maybe in the future, they both will become famous athletes," his wife said. "Do you have a lake in your yard?" Javier asked Ernesto. "A lake?" "No, there's no lake. But we have a big pool. We often relax there. On weekends, our parents' friends come over with their kids. I'll definitely introduce you to them." "Yes, Javier. We have a big pool. I'll teach you how to swim," said his father. "Really?" "Of course, now we'll have plenty of time." "Oh, great," replied the boy, but he looked a bit sad. "What's wrong?" the man asked. He took the boy aside. "I understand, my son. You've lost the people closest to you. But always remember, they are always with you. Forever in your heart." "Really?" "Of course. Come here, I'll give you a hug." "Say cheese," shouted the brother, running up to them with a camera. "Ernesto also likes to take pictures of everything," Victor smiled. "Darling, come join us. Let's take a photo all together." "I'm coming, darling." Ernesto aimed the camera at himself and everyone else. "Cheese," they all shouted in unison. "Well, it's time to go," Victor said. Javier took one last look at the streets of this city. At the house where he used to live. He smiled and headed for the car. He smiled as if he had understood everything that had happened. And not only understood, but also accepted it. "Do you think he'll be okay?" his wife asked. "He's already okay. Javier is a strong child. Now we just need to support him and love him." His wife kissed him and also went to the car. Victor looked back. Ernesto was photographing a stray cat. The man chuckled. "Ernesto, come on, get in the car. Or we'll leave without you." "I'm coming." Now Victor, too, looked at the streets of this city for the last time. He smiled a warm farewell smile. As they were already driving home, they realized that everything that had happened was strange. But that was their story. They had to go through many difficulties to restore the older son's psyche, to rebuild family relationships from scratch. But the boy, sitting in the back seat with his brother, thought to himself that this was nothing compared to what he had gone through. If you enjoyed the story, please support it with a like and a comment. All the best to you.